The gavel fell like a gunshot. Sharp, final. The courtroom held its breath. The judge, a stern man with deep-set eyes, cleared his throat and said the words that would ripple across every news channel by nightfall. Defendant is hereby sentenced to death. Gasps rippled through the room, some from anger, some from shock, and some from a kind of grief that had no place in a room built for judgment. At the defense table, Officer Emily Carter sat perfectly still. She didn't cry, didn't flinch, didn't beg. She simply placed one hand on the leash by her side, the leash attached to a German shepherd sitting dutifully at her feet. His name was Valor, 4 years old, trained in search and rescue, narcotics detection, and emotional stabilization. But today, he wasn't there as an officer. Today, he was just hers. Reporters scrambled for angles, photos of Emily's sharp uniform, now traded for a county jumpsuit, photos of Valor calm and focused, pressing his side against hers as if to say, "I'm still here." The prosecution had argued Emily was responsible for a crime that shook the state: corruption, cover-ups, obstruction of justice. The details were messy, the politics messier, but the sentence? That was clear. And as she stood to be led away, it wasn't her composure that made headlines. It was what happened next. Valor didn't resist when deputies moved to separate them. He didn't growl, didn't pull. He simply refused to let go. As they tugged on his leash, he planted his paws against the tiled floor, muscles stiffening, neck stretched toward Emily. He didn't bark. He didn't snap. He just looked at her, ears back, eyes wide, and let out a sound no one had ever heard from him before. Not a whine, not a growl, a kind of broken keening, like a heart splitting open, like a farewell he didn't understand. The bailiff hesitated. Valor wasn't a pet. He was an officer, too. Technically, he should have been taken to the K-9 division for reassignment, reprogrammed, repurposed. But Valor didn't care about chains of command. He cared about her. Emily turned once at the door. No handcuffs. She hadn't resisted arrest. Her eyes found his, and she whispered something too low for the cameras to catch. "Good boy. Always." They had to physically carry Valor out. He didn't bite, didn't fight, just struggled the way a soul struggles when it knows it's about to be torn in half. The courtroom sat frozen, not because of the human drama, but because of the raw, visible grief of a dog who didn't understand politics or blame or justice. He only understood loyalty. The video hit the internet before Emily even reached the county transport van. Within hours, 6.4 million views. #Save Valor trending in 5 countries. Thousands of comments demanding leniency, not for Emily, but for the dog. Dogs don't pledge loyalty to criminals. They pledge it to hearts. This wasn't justice. It was betrayal of something pure. Whatever she did, she was still his hero. By midnight, protests flared, not just about the sentence, not just about corruption, but about what Valor represented, faithfulness in a world too jaded to believe it still existed. The state offered a statement. Valor will be reassigned for future service per department guidelines. But no one wanted that. Not after seeing the way he dragged his leash behind him, not after seeing him press his face against the transport van window, eyes locked on the place where Emily had disappeared. There were rumors that Valor refused to eat, that he howled at night until his throat went raw, that he attacked no one, but recoiled from every touch that didn't smell like her. The world watched, waited, wondered. What no one knew yet, what even Emily didn't know, was that Valor wasn't done making his stand, because loyalty like his doesn't just fade because the world says it should, and love like that, it doesn't ask permission. It doesn't break with verdicts. It stays until the very last breath. The petitions started small, a few hundred names, mostly local activists, but by the end of the first week, over 1.2 million people had signed, demanding one thing: let Valor retire with dignity, let him go home. The state tried to spin it, tried to bury it under press releases filled with phrases like operational necessity and handler reassignment. But it didn't work. Because for once, the public wasn't listening to lawyers. They were listening to a dog. Videos surfaced, old footage from community events, Emily in uniform, Valor trotting at her side, kids clinging to his neck at parades, Valor demonstrating search and rescue techniques for third graders, tail wagging like a flag. A photo circulated of Emily in a flooded street during a hurricane rescue. Valor on her shoulders, soaked and panting, while she waded waist deep through water to save an elderly woman. She hadn't waited for orders that day. She had acted, just like Valor always did. The deeper people dug, the murkier things got. Yes, Emily had made mistakes, big ones. She had turned a blind eye to corruption in her department, signed off on reports she shouldn't have, protected officers she should have exposed, but she hadn't taken bribes, hadn't assaulted civilians, hadn't enriched herself. Her crime was loyalty to the wrong people, misplaced trust, not malice, not greed, and in Valor's eyes, loyalty wasn't a flaw. It was everything. Meanwhile, Valor languished. Handlers reported he refused to work. He wouldn't sniff out contraband, wouldn't respond to commands. He lay in the farthest corner of the K9 unit kennel, staring at the door, waiting, always waiting. Behavioral specialists were brought in. One wrote in her report, severe emotional distress, presenting symptoms analogous to clinical depression. Another wrote simply, this dog is grieving. The public outcry grew louder. Memes appeared, photos of Valor captioned with, loyalty is not a crime. Who's the real criminal? Set Valor free. Television hosts wept on air. Veterans posted videos comparing Valor's loyalty to soldiers who refused to abandon their wounded brothers. Even celebrities spoke out. One A-list actor posted, "We have a dog teaching the world about honor, while adults argue about optics." Then came the flashpoint. A retired K9 officer, a grizzled sergeant who had trained hundreds of dogs, wrote an open letter. It was published in newspapers across the country. In it, he said, "You can train a dog to sit. You can train a dog to track, but you cannot train a dog to love. Valor made his choice. It's about damn time we respected it." Pressure mounted, protests grew, and quietly behind closed doors, a handful of officials began to panic. Because no matter what they said, the story had outgrown them. It wasn't about crime anymore. It wasn't about politics. It was about something purer, something rare, something they couldn't spin. In the middle of it all, Emily sat alone in her cell. No visitors, no interviews, no voice in the storm raging outside. Until one day, her attorney, a weary man with sad eyes, slid a battered manila envelope across the table. Inside, printouts of thousands of letters, children's drawings of Valor with capes, letters from veterans, notes from families whose homes Emily had helped rebuild after natural disasters, and at the very bottom, folded and smudged with fingerprints, a petition with 2 million signatures. She ran her fingers over the paper, smiled, just a little. "They're fighting for him, aren't they?" Her lawyer nodded. "They're fighting for both of you." She laughed once, short and broken. "I don't deserve it." "Maybe not," he said, "but Valor thinks you do." Later that night, the guards found her sitting cross-legged on the cell floor, whispering to no one. No, not to no one. To him. To the dog who couldn't hear her words but felt them anyway. Words she repeated like a prayer. Good boy, good boy, good boy. What no one outside knew was that the clock was ticking. Valor wasn't just sad. He was deteriorating. His muscles were weakening, his coat dulling. And unless something changed soon, he wouldn't survive long enough to see freedom. The world had fought for his right to live. Now they would have to fight for his right to choose. And they had no idea that Valor was already planning his own way out. The state made their decision. Behind closed doors, far from cameras and microphones, a final choice was signed into order. Valor would be reassigned permanently. New handler, new location, new life. They even scheduled a small ceremony to honor his service. A neat, sanitized goodbye, meant to bury the uproar under a carefully staged photo op. They thought it would work. They thought they could control the story. They didn't know Valor. They didn't understand that some oaths aren't broken by paperwork. The day of the reassignment arrived under a gray sky. No speeches, no banners. Just a few officers, some cameras, and a transporter van with a new handler waiting inside. Valor was brought out on a heavy-duty tactical leash. 2 officers flanked him, hands firm. He didn't resist, didn't pull, just walked slowly, deliberately, eyes scanning the empty parking lot as if searching for something or someone not there. The cameras clicked. Someone gave a rehearsed speech about Valor's ongoing contribution to public safety. The new handler approached, leash ready, reached for him. And that's when it happened. Without warning, Valor sat down. Not in confusion, not in fear, in defiance. His body language was clear. He wasn't going. He wasn't changing. He wasn't leaving. The officers tugged, called his name, snapped fingers. Valor didn't move, didn't blink, didn't budge. He simply lowered his chest to the asphalt, pressed his nose against the concrete, and closed his eyes. The handler knelt, coaxing gently. Nothing. The cameras caught it all. The live stream picked it up. And within minutes, hashtags exploded again. Hashtag let Valor choose. Good boy Valor. Stand with Valor. Inside the transport van, the handlers debated. Force him? Carry him? But no one could bring themselves to do it, because what they were seeing wasn't rebellion. It was grief made visible. It was loyalty made tangible. It was a dog breaking protocol for something bigger than commands. Then a quiet voice spoke through the chaos. It was Jamie, the same shelter worker who had cared for Cooper. She stood at the edge of the lot, hands shaking, holding a simple request from Emily's attorney. A printed document, unofficial but powerful. Let him see her one last time. The officers laughed it off. Rules, regulations, security risks. But the crowd gathering around them wasn't laughing. They were silent, waiting, watching, daring the system to make the wrong choice again. After several tense minutes, a decision was made, not by policy, not by politics, by pressure. They agreed. 10 minutes, no contact, supervised, quick, controlled. They thought it would be enough. They had no idea what they were unleashing. Emily was brought out in shackles, thin, pale, but when she saw Valor lying on the pavement, she stumbled, not from weakness, but from something older, deeper. Recognition. They allowed her 20 feet, no closer. A guard held her chain tight. Valor heard her before anyone else. He lifted his head. His tail twitched once, twice. Then he stood. Slowly, like a soldier rising after a long battle, and he walked, not rushed, not desperate, deliberate. Every step like a vow being written into the earth. The crowd parted. The guard stiffened, but no one stopped him. When he reached her, he sat, pressed his body against her leg, and looked up, waiting. Emily knelt as far as her restraints allowed. Tears streamed down her face. "Good boy," she whispered, voice breaking. Valor licked the cuffed hand trembling at her side, once, twice, and then, right there, surrounded by news cameras, police, and strangers, he laid down across her feet, shielding her body with his, refusing to move. It wasn't violent, it wasn't loud, it was devastating, because in that moment, every person watching realized the same thing. They could separate them on paper. They could assign Valor a new handler, a new badge, a new purpose, but they could never, ever reassign his heart. The guards approached cautiously, prepared to lift him, prepared to drag him, but Valor didn't growl, didn't bite. He simply stayed, a silent, immovable promise. I chose her. I choose her still. The footage went viral before the van door even slammed shut. Pundits argued, lawyers bickered, politicians scrambled. But it didn't matter anymore, because no spin in the world could undo what the cameras had captured. Love that obeyed no court, loyalty that needed no permission. The photo traveled faster than any press release. Valor stretched across Emily's shackled feet, head resting on her lap, as if daring the world to move him. Within an hour, it was everywhere, on every news station, on every social feed, in every heart that still remembered what loyalty looked like. The state issued a statement by evening, cold, clinical. While we respect the emotional investment shown by the public, valor remains an asset to be deployed as necessary for the safety of the community. They thought that would be the end of it. They thought wrong. Protests exploded, not in anger, in mourning. Candlelight vigils were held in over 20 cities. People brought their dogs, held signs that read, "Not property, not weapon, family." A leash isn't loyalty, a heart is. Valor chose, let him stay. Veterans groups joined in. Former canine handlers posted open letters. We train them to obey, yes, but what they give us isn't trained. It's sacred. Celebrities, politicians, influencers, everyone weighed in. And for the first time, public sentiment didn't fracture. It unified. Because no matter how divided the world was on justice, on politics, on everything else, everyone understood a dog who refused to abandon his person. The governor received over 8 million emails in 5 days. Phones at the Department of Corrections crashed from the call volume. Even the warden at the facility where Emily was held admitted, "I've never seen anything like it. It's not outrage, it's grief." Meanwhile, Valor waited, back in his kennel, not eating much, not sleeping well, just lying near the door, whining softly when he heard footsteps that didn't sound like hers. The staff tried everything, new toys, treats, walks. Nothing mattered, because Valor wasn't confused, he wasn't anxious, he was clear, he was waiting, and he would wait as long as it took. Then, quietly, and without ceremony, the decision came down. Not from a press conference, not from a PR team, from a judge. In a private ruling sealed for security reasons, but leaked by an anonymous source within hours. In the interest of the animal's health, safety, and welfare, Valor is hereby permitted to remain in proximity to Officer Emily Carter until further judicial determination. Translation? He could stay, not free, not perfect, but close, together. The reaction was instant. Hashtags erupted again. Hashtag Valor won hashtag real justice. He chose. Her people cried openly on live streams. Veterans hugged their service dogs tighter. Shelters reported spikes in adoption inquiries, especially for senior dogs labeled difficult or unadoptable. It wasn't just about valor anymore. It was about faith, hope, redemption. All the things humans forget they're allowed to have until someone with paws and teeth and an unbreakable heart reminds them. A month later, Emily was transferred to a new facility with a special unit for inmates in terminal phases or under unique protective status. Valor was assigned official designation as an emotional support officer. Technically still an employee. Practically, family. Their reunion wasn't televised, no cameras, no interviews, just a small courtyard, a patch of grass, and one dog barreling across it like a bullet of pure joy, straight into the arms of a woman who had already lost everything, except him. He knocked her down, pinned her, and licked her face until she laughed. Not because anything was fixed, not because anything would ever be fair, but because, for that moment, they were still theirs. And valor? He wagged his tail like a flag planted in ground he refused to surrender. Because he had fought the world once, and won. Not with teeth, not with force, but with something the world had forgotten how to measure. Unbreakable devotion. Time didn't erase the story. If anything, it etched it deeper. Valor and Emily became a symbol not because they won fame, but because they reminded people of a kind of loyalty the world pretends doesn't exist anymore. In the special unit, Emily lived simply. A small room, limited privileges, no freedom in the way most would measure it. But for her, freedom came on 4 legs, in the form of a dog who still greeted her every morning like it was the first, who curled around her when nightmares gripped her tighter than any chains, who didn't ask what she had done or failed to do, who simply stayed. Guards learned quickly that Valor was different. He wasn't aggressive, wasn't unpredictable, but he was protective. If Emily cried, he was at her side before a human could blink. If a staff member raised a voice, even unintentionally, Valor would place his body between her and the sound, standing tall and silent. He didn't need to growl, he didn't need to bare teeth. His presence said enough. She matters. You will treat her like she does. Therapists, hardened corrections officers, even visiting officials began requesting time in the courtyard where Emily and Valor spent their afternoons. Not to interrogate, not to monitor, to watch, to remember. What it looked like when forgiveness walked on four paws and weighed nothing except its own heart. Years passed, slow and heavy. The world outside moved on. New scandals, new stories, new fights. But for those who remembered, Valor's story stayed like a flame behind the ribs. Quiet, but stubborn. The kind of light you don't forget once you've seen it. When Emily's health began to fail, quietly, inevitably, Valor didn't change. He still woke every morning ready to walk beside her, still slept beside her cot, still wagged when her hands, weaker now, brushed his ears. Because love doesn't measure in time. It measures in presence, in staying, all the way, to the very end. The night Emily passed, it was raining. Soft, steady. The kind of rain that blurs the world, but sharpens the heart. Valor was there. Of course he was, curled against her side, head rising and falling with each shallow breath. And when the monitor stopped beeping, when the world tilted and gasped, he didn't panic. He simply laid his head against her chest and stayed for hours until staff, in tears themselves, finally coaxed him gently away. They gave him a choice that day: retirement, adoption, comfort. Valor accepted none of it. He simply curled up by the entrance to the facility and stayed there, waiting, watching, not for orders, not for handlers, for something deeper, for the memory of the one he chose. Valor passed 6 weeks later, in his sleep, peaceful, without pain, without loneliness, because some hearts don't stop from sickness. They stop when their purpose is complete. And his had been carved into stone long before anyone realized they were even watching. Today, a statue stands in the courtyard of that facility. It's not grand, not gold, just simple stone. A woman sitting cross-legged on the ground, a German shepherd lying across her lap, eyes closed, trusting. Still. The plaque reads, "He chose her. He chose hope." And beneath it, barely visible unless you kneel down close enough to feel the weight of it, another line, "Good boy, always." If this story touched you, don't let it end here. Share it. For every Valor who waits quietly beside someone the world gave up on. For every Emily who believed they didn't deserve to be stayed for and were proven wrong. Comment below with the name of the soul, human or animal, who taught you that loyalty isn't earned by being perfect, but by being loved without condition. And subscribe for more stories that remind us, sometimes the greatest acts of courage are silent. Sometimes the most powerful revolutions walk on four legs. And sometimes love refuses to obey the rules. And thank God it does. God, it